There are maps you have seen, and there are maps you were never meant to see. The first are the neat, familiar shapes inked in classrooms and atlases, showing continents, as we believe them to be, islands of certainty floating upon oceans of assumption. The second lie hidden in vaults, monasteries, and private collections, whispering in the darkness of things that should not exist. I invite you now to imagine a single room, deep beneath the cobbled streets of an ancient European city, lit only by the trembling light of oil lamps. Upon a table of blackened oak rests a skin of parchment so old that its edges curl like autumn leaves. The ink upon it glows faintly under the flame, as if remembering a light older than the sun. The coastlines are familiar yet altered, rivers where no rivers should be, mountains where deserts now reign, and in the center of the oceans, lands that the modern world insists were never there. One such map, the Piri-Reis chart of 1513, bears coastlines of Antarctica free from ice drawn centuries before modern men first set foot upon that frozen shore. Another, more elusive, known only through a handful of scholars who dare speak of it, shows a vast archipelago stretching across what we now call the Pacific, its names etched in glyphs that match no known tongue. How could these shapes exist, save for the memories of civilizations whose cities have long turned to silt? The ancients, the ones who first inked these impossible lands, were not cartographers in the modern sense. They were custodians of a cosmic memory, inheritors of a cartography not of geography alone, but of the soul. Their maps were mirrors, reflecting not only coastlines but the hidden architecture of reality itself, the ley lines where Earth's energies flow, the stellar alignments that guide destiny, and the secret proportions that bind heaven to earth. As your eyes trace these phantom continents, you may feel a strange stirring, as if some part of you recognizes them. Perhaps it is the memory of a life before this one, a dream of a shoreline where the waves spoke a language you once knew. Perhaps it is the whisper of the Hermetic maxim, as above so below, as within so without, for the maps that survive are but shadows of an even older knowledge, a knowledge suppressed, sealed, and buried beneath the sands of time. And so, seeker, we step together onto the threshold. The ink of forgotten hands will lead us through the labyrinth, and the first turn lies ahead, into the lands that vanished, yet still live in the hidden geometry of the earth. Picture an ocean not as it is now, but as it was when the moon hung lower and the tides obeyed a different rhythm. Beneath those ancient waters lay lands vast and luminous, their coastlines caressed by warm winds that no longer blow, their mountains crowned with temples whose peaks now sleep in the deep. The names we have for them, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, are but fractured echoes of the true words, syllables once spoken in temples of white stone, carved with sigils that could summon the memory of the stars. The oldest maps that hint at these continents are veiled, their meaning half hidden in allegory. In the Indian Ocean, there is the phantom outline of Kumari Kandam, a southern land remembered in Tamil epics as the cradle of a lost golden age. In the Pacific, the Marshallese stick charts, made not to chart islands alone, but the swell and pulse of the sea, preserve an oral memory of archipelagos that no longer break the surface. And in the depths of the Atlantic, there are medieval portolan charts where islands float like ghosts, appearing on one generation's map only to vanish in the next. The Hermetic traditions speak of cycles, great cosmic breaths where civilizations rise with the in-breath of creation, only to sink back into the ocean's embrace with the exhale. The all is mind, the old texts remind us, and the erasure of a land from the physical plane is mirrored by its slow fading from collective thought. Yet in the geometry of these maps, in the proportions of their phantom shores, there lingers an unbroken thread, a sacred ratio linking them to the pyramids of Giza, to the megaliths of Easter Island, to the standing stones of Karnak. Some say these lands were not merely physical realms but liminal thresholds, where the material and spiritual were woven as one, their coordinates preserved in forbidden charts, align not only with earthly landscapes, but with the pathways of stars. The drowned mountains of Atlantis align with Orion's belt as it appeared 12,000 years ago. The submerged plateaus of Mu mirror the Pleiades in their ancient rising. It is here in these sunken cartographies that we begin to suspect the ancients mapped not a static earth, but a living one, a being whose lands shift, whose bones move, whose waters remember. And if the earth remembers, then so too do we. The maps, like dreams, are invitations to awaken that memory from these vanished continents. The path now turns toward the keepers of such knowledge, those who, through fire, conquest, and the long silence of exile, carried the forbidden charts into the future. They are the ones whose names are half remembered, in legend, whose symbols still speak from the margins of old manuscripts. They were not kings, though kings feared them. They were not priests, though their words shaped the liturgies of temples. They were the map keepers, a lineage of watchers who walked the shifting frontiers between memory and oblivion. Their charge was simple and perilous: to preserve the cartographies of the elder world. Even when empires fell, seas rose, and the truth became a crime, in the cloisters of Alexandria's great library, before the flames consumed its scrolls, there existed a chamber where only a handful of adepts were permitted. There, under the guise of statues depicting Thoth, god of wisdom and time, were stored parchment and papyrus drawn from all corners of the known and unknown earth. To the uninitiated, they looked like mere maps, but for the custodians, each chart was a fragment of a cosmic diagram, its symbols readable only to those versed in the mysteries of sacred geometry and celestial harmonics. When the armies came, whether bearing the eagle of Rome, the crescent of the Caliphate, or the cross of the Crusaders, these custodians vanish into the shadowed currents of history, carrying with them rolled skins and carved tablets. In the centuries that followed, they became wandering astronomer priests in the deserts of Arabia, mariners aboard Phoenician ships, keepers of strange star globes in the courts of Moorish Spain. Some settled in the monasteries of the Caucasus, hiding their charts behind illuminated psalters, disguising coastlines as ornate vines and rivers as streams of golden script. Their knowledge was dangerous because it told a different story of humanity. It whispered that civilization's roots did not begin in the Fertile Crescent alone, but in a network of luminous cities that had risen and fallen long before the accepted dawn of history. It hinted that the boundaries of the known world were not drawn by chance, but in accordance with a divine template, a blueprint of worlds traced by the movement of the heavens. The custodians spoke in the language of allegory, using myths as ciphers. An island in a map might be disguised as the lair of a sea serpent in a sailor's tale. A mountain range might appear only as the spine of the sleeping dragon in a monk's marginalia. Yet for those who knew the key, a sequence of ratios, a line drawn from a star to a solstice sunrise, the truth unfolded like a blossom in darkness. Even now, there are whispers of maps that remain in their possession, handed from one sworn guardian to another. Some say they are etched on metal so old it hums when touched, others on crystal plates that reveal entire landscapes when lit by moonlight. These relics are never shown in full, only in fragments, for to see the whole is to see the true history of the world, and that seeker is a vision from which there is no return. From these keepers, the road leads us into an even deeper mystery: how the maps themselves were made, not with compass and ruler, but by methods so strange they border on the miraculous. To the modern eye, a map is an act of measurement, lines drawn after journeys taken, surveys made, and horizons reached. But for the ancients, the greatest maps were not drawn after the journey. They were drawn before it. They were visions, inscribed in ink, diagrams of places the hand had never touched, yet which the soul remembered. Consider the old Hermetic axiom: that which is below corresponds to that which is above. To the mapmakers of the elder world, the earth was not a sphere to be charted from without, but a reflection of the cosmic order. a sacred vessel whose shape could be read through the positions of the stars. By observing the heavens, they claimed one could draw the world entire, for the pattern of the sky was the pattern of the land. The Egyptian temple schools taught that the Nile's course mirrored the Milky Way, that the delta's branching channels were the same as the stars in Cygnus. The Inca priests, high in the Andes, traced their empire's holy sites to the positions of dark constellations, not the bright stars, but the shadows between them. As if charting the negative space of creation itself, Polynesian navigators, guided by chants older than their islands, memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, using their positions to conjure in the mind a map spanning thousands of miles of open ocean. But the most forbidden technique, whispered of in only a handful of occult manuscripts, was the seeing of the world from above, a form of astral cartography in which the adept would leave the confine east of the body, rise above the curvature of the earth, and look upon its face as the gods themselves once did. The Shans al-Ma'arif speaks obliquely of this in its riddles, and fragments of Sumerian cylinder seals depict figures floating above a curved horizon, holding in their hands tablets marked with coastlines. The ancients inscribed more than land and sea. They marked the veins of the earth, the invisible currents we call ley lines, tracing them like arteries of a living being. Sacred sites were not placed at random. They stood at the nodes of this energy lattice, where the planet's breath and the cosmic pulse met. Many of these points appear on old charts as circles, spirals, or eyes, symbols to guide the initiated to the untrained. Such maps seem fanciful, adorned with beasts and strange sigils, but to those who possess the key, they reveal a truth far beyond physical geography. They are blueprints for the reconstruction of the lost world, both on earth and within the self. For as one traces these lines in the mind, they awaken corresponding paths in the soul, leading the seeker inward to the forgotten continents of the spirit. And so, we follow these lines, these hidden meridians of earth and sky, into the next realm of the mystery, where the maps cease to be objects at all, and instead become doorways. There are those who believe the most ancient maps are not meant to be read, but entered. To them, each coastline is a threshold, each river a path into a place that does not exist in the physical world alone. These maps are not mere depictions. They are talismans, consecrated with intention, meant to open the mind to spaces that lie between time and matter. Legends from Tibet speak of terma, hidden treasures, objects concealed by enlightened masters to be found only when the seeker is ready. Some of these were scrolls containing what appeared to be simple charts, but when meditated upon for days, the lines seemed to shift and the paper to deepen, until the initiate found themselves walking through a vast landscape beneath a sky of unfamiliar stars. In medieval Europe, whispers told of a chart of passage kept by the knights of the temple, a vellum skin painted with a maze of rivers and roads which, if traced with a finger while reciting certain words, would draw the soul from the body and deliver it to the threshold of a temple that exists outside history. Among the Dogon of Mali, certain diagrams of Sirius are said to carry the memory of a journey taken by the ancestors, not by ship or caravan, but through the water of the sky, a realm that is neither entirely material nor dream. Such maps require no compass, only the surrender of one's ordinary senses. The initiate learns to walk within the map as one walks a labyrinth, turning inward, passing through symbolic gates until arriving at a center, the still point from which all worlds emerge. The Hermeticists knew this as the art of the gate. Every true map, they taught, was a fragment of the greater map, the primal diagram that charts the journey from the world of shadows to the world of light. The proportions of this master map are echoed in sacred architecture, in the layout of ancient cities, in the spiral shells of the deep sea. To contemplate it is to be drawn toward a convergence point, the axis mundi, the pillar that unites heaven, earth, and the underworld. Those who step through such doorways often return changed, speaking in symbols and parables. Some bore new knowledge of forgotten histories. The shape of a vanished coast, the position of a star as it was in an age before memory. Others returned with silence, for the world they had touched could not be translated into words without breaking its power. But if the maps can open paths into other realms, one must ask, who placed them there and for what purpose? That question leads us deeper still to the ancient orders who not only protected these gateways, but wove their symbols into the very fabric of human culture. Throughout history, there have been hands behind the veil, guiding, concealing, revealing only what the age could bear. These were not mere scholars or explorers, but initiates of lineages older than kingdoms, whose allegiance was to the great pattern rather than any crown. They moved like phantoms through empires, bearing knowledge that could redraw the boundaries of the world, and with it, the fate of humanity. In the courts of pharaohs, they appeared as temple architects aligning monuments to constellations whose significance was understood by only a handful. In the academies of Greece, they wore the robes of philosophers, their discourse a web of allegory that, when unraveled, revealed geographies no mortal eye had seen. In the medieval world, they surfaced in orders like the Sufite brotherhoods, the monastic alchemists, the Knights of the Temple, each a custodian of fragments from the same hidden atlas. The Rosicrucian manifestos spoke of the invisible college, a brotherhood scattered across the earth, each member holding a piece of the great map, according to whispered tradition. These fragments were encoded not only in ink but in stone, woven into the blueprints of cathedrals, labyrinth gardens, and astronomical clocks. The uninitiated saw only beauty, the adept saw directions, a sequence of symbols pointing to a place both real and not real, a sanctuary of the older knowledge. Among these orders, secrecy was not born of greed, but of the hermetic law that sacred truth must remain veiled. Until the seeker is prepared, a map is more than a diagram. It is a key to altering perception, and thus reality. In untrained hands, it can lead to ruin. For to walk the hidden paths without guidance is to court the abyss. The Templars were said to possess a chart drawn on linen, not parchment, that depicted the earth as a living organism. Along its edges were strange annotations in a script resembling Phoenician, some pointing toward submerged lands, others toward places far inland that glowed with unseen light. After the order's fall, fragments of this chart were rumored to pass into the keeping of certain lodges of Freemasons, who embedded its lines into the floor plans of their meeting halls, turning the very ground into a ritual map. The truth, whispered only in the inner chambers, is that these orders were less concerned with where a place was and more with when it could be reached. For the most guarded maps are not fixed in space. They are maps of time, revealing windows when certain worlds draw close to our own. To possess such a chart is to hold a compass that turns not toward north, but toward destiny. And it is here, seeker, that we find ourselves on the edge of a greater revelation, that the ancient maps may not only chart lost lands, but the cycles of reality itself. Imagine a map where coastlines are not drawn in ink, but in the flowing arcs of ages, where each line is a tide in the great ocean of time, advancing and retreating according to a rhythm older than history. Such charts are rare, for they are not made to navigate ships, but to navigate epochs. In the Mayan codices, there are star maps intertwined with their calendar wheels, vast spirals of days and cantons, tracking not only the movement of the heavens, but the rise and fall of worlds. In the Vedic tradition, the yugas unfold like continents on a temporal sea, vast stretches of golden ages, silver shores, bronze plateaus, and iron abysses, each repeating in cosmic cycles. Those who knew how to read such time maps could predict when forgotten lands might emerge from the deep, when old gateways would flare open again like beacons in the dark. The Hermetic texts speak of the great year, the slow turning of the heavens over 26,000 years, a breath of the cosmos itself. In this turning, there are alignments when the inner and outer worlds draw close enough for the traveler to step between them. Ancient navigators of the soul timed their journeys not to the tides of the sea, but to these celestial convergences, knowing that a place unreachable today might be found easily 1,000 years before, or 1,000 years hence. One map said, to be kept under lock in a Tibetan monastery, shows the earth not as a static sphere, but as a shifting mosaic of possible worlds, each connected by thin, luminous bridges that appear only in certain centuries. Another, preserved in a coded manuscript from Moorish Spain, depicts rivers and mountains that correspond to constellations, but the constellations themselves are drawn in the positions they will hold millennia in the future. To follow such a chart is to surrender the notion of linear history. The traveler becomes a pilgrim of time, navigating not toward where a place is, but when it will be. This is the labyrinth, not a maze of walls, but a weave of moments, where each turn is a leap across centuries. Some who walk it return to their origin, bearing strange relics of other ages. Others vanish, their names surfacing in myths of golden cities, immortal visitors, and gods who arrived by sea. And here, at the final turning, the ancient maps reveal their deepest secret, that they are not merely tools for finding lost places, but mirrors showing the seeker their own hidden origin and destiny. At the end of the path, the map lies open before you. It is not the yellow parchment you imagined, nor the jeweled chart guarded in a temple vault. It is a living surface, shifting and luminous, as if woven from strands of light and memory. Every line you traced through oceans, mountains, and stars now bends inward, converging toward a single point, your own reflection. The ancients knew this final truth. All maps, however grand, led inward. The lost continents, the vanished ports, the lands glimpsed only between the tides of time. These are not only places in the outer world, but landscapes of the soul. Atlantis is the memory of your own golden age, Lemuria the echo of a language you once spoke before words. The ley lines are the channels of energy running through your own being. The Exus Mundi is the stillness at your own center. Hermetic philosophers taught that the kingdom of heaven is within you not as a metaphor, but as a navigable realm. The greatest explorers were those who realized the journey across oceans was only a reflection of the voyage. Across the inner sea, every sacred site mirrored an inner temple, every constellation an arrangement of inner lights. The map was never merely to guide the body, but to awaken the soul to its own vastness. The orders who guarded the forbidden charts understood this. They withheld the full vision not to hoard power, but to ensure the seeker would not mistake the shadow for the source. To reach the final threshold unprepared is to see a truth one cannot bear, that the outer and inner worlds are the same, and that by changing one, you change the other. Now, at the center, the map folds itself away, the coasts dissolve into clouds, the rivers into light, and you are left standing on a shore both utterly familiar and entirely new. Behind you lies the path of ruins and whispers, of myths and symbols, of stars and tides. Before you lies the uncharted, the place where the next map will be drawn, perhaps by your own hand. For the ultimate purpose of these ancient maps was never merely to redefine history. It was to redefine the traveler, to transform them from seeker into creator, from one who follows the chart to one who becomes it. And so the journey ends where it began and begins where it ends. The ink fades, but the lines remain written, now in the corridors of your own being. The world is vaster than you were told, and you are vaster than you imagined. The map is you. The map is all. The map is the memory of eternity, and the promise that nothing is ever truly lost.